Today on Inspired Money.
Think of finances less like, I've got to reorganize the garage, which may be a bit overwhelming, and more like brushing your teeth or flossing, which is it's quick and it's short. And that's honestly the way we built this course. You may decide you don't need to check in daily, but a habit, if you haven't been in the habit, and if you're sort of blind and have been frankly enjoying tuning out to your finances, a new habit that's daily is a far easier one than one that's, on the third day or a Wednesday and a Friday or whatever.
This is episode 176 with founder of Tiller Money, Peter Polson. Welcome to Inspired Money. My name is Andy Wong, a managing partner at Runnymede Capital Management. Each week, we bring you an interesting person to help you get inspired, shift your perspectives on money, and achieve incredible things. From making it to giving it away, Inspired Money means making a difference, creating something bigger than oneself, and maybe, just maybe, making the world a better place. Thank you for joining me. Hey, Inspired Moneymaker, welcome back. Our guest today is Peter Polson, who founded fintech company Tiller Money in 2014. If his name is familiar to you, that's because Peter was a guest on episode 45, so go back and listen to that if you want to hear his career path to founding Tiller Money. Like Jim Huffman from episode 159, Peter kind of followed a similar path from banker to entrepreneur. Peter was a tech analyst at JP Morgan and found that he was more inspired by the entrepreneurs and business owners who were the bank's clients than being an investment banker himself. He eventually would go on to found Tiller Money, a fintech company that helps its customers to manage their financial lives in a spreadsheet, automatically updating every day. The first time Peter was on Inspired Money, he talked about why tracking your money is such an important practice. Because once you start, you cannot help but try to make improvements. According to the folks at Tiller Money, today the most financially engaged people use spreadsheets more than any other tool to manage their money. Tiller makes that easy by providing helpful templates and then downloading your latest transaction and bank data each day into your spreadsheet. If you're a spreadsheet whiz, you can customize your entire financial reporting life to your liking. In this episode, you'll learn what open banking is and why we should care as consumers, tips and tricks for tracking our spending, and then listen to the end to hear how Peter is teaching his kids about money. Now let's get inspired with Peter Polson. Peter, welcome back to Inspired Money. You are the first guest to have a number 2 return appearance.
Okay, that's an honor. Wow. Well, Andy, thanks for having me back today.
Well, I really enjoyed our conversation. I think it was June of 2018. You really shared with us the good work that you're doing at Tiller, but most importantly, the power of tracking one's expenses. A budget can be scary, but just tracking household finances can be extremely powerful and a good place to start. Give us a little update on what you've been up to. I know that there have been changes and updates.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a busy period for Tiller Money. We continue to be about giving people a place to manage their finances in the most flexible and customizable way. We're really for the home for people who want to do it their way. And one of the big initiatives in the last year, we've continued to build out our solutions around Google Sheets, and also we've been growing into Microsoft Excel, giving people the choice of platforms. And over the last year, we have launched the Tiller Money community, which has been this really exciting, vibrant place for people, for customers to share what they're doing in Tiller Money. And the nature of our solution is it's so flexible. You can really come at your finances anyway. And that's why people love Tiller Money. We're not binding you to a rigid methodology or to a limited tool set that can only do certain things. And so this community has been this incredible place where we have customers and community members sharing what they're doing, asking questions of each other. We're obviously participating a lot as Tiller Money, but it's really become alive because of the thousands of people in there who are actively sharing and participating. And that's been a really fun new dimension. I get a huge buzz from hearing how we impact our customers. And traditionally, the way we hear about that is through support. Customers will sometimes share stories, and that always fires me up. But the community is this whole new dimension, and hearing and seeing what customers are doing, hearing how they're sharing and helping each other and sharing their wins. And so that's honestly been a really big new dimension and a fun new twist. The other big part that I can speak to is we have recently launched open banking, and we can go into that, but that's a whole big new initiative for Tiller, and also we're proud to be on the leading edge of that in the United States.
Okay, let's start there. What does open banking mean to your customers and anyone who wants to be tracking their finances better using spreadsheets?
Open banking is a broad initiative, and it's really, if you think back historically, banks have wanted to be the go-to place and single source of truth. They want to be everything that you need in a financial relationship. And in the traditional model, if you roll back many years, that made a lot of sense. Fintech has really disrupted that, and we're part of that, and we're part of a larger movement because there are companies like ours building innovative solutions that help real people gain new insights and do new things in tracking and managing their money. And banks have traditionally, because of that, the former mindset, they've looked at us with some reticence and not wanted to make it easy to get access to the data that they have. And at times that has manifested in even some spats that banks have had with solutions like ours, where they're like, no, we're not going to make our data easy for you to access. And what has happened is they've actually heard from customers. We regularly hear customers coming to Tiller Money, and they say, hey, this bank might not be working really well for me. What are the best banks that work with Tiller Money? Because there are a few edge cases of some banks that in the past haven't worked. Well, all that has changed a lot in the last year. Banks have realized, look, people care more about some of these tools and services than they care about us as a bank. We've got to get behind this. And so in other places, like in the UK, it has been regulated. In the US, the banks have actually embraced it without regulation. In a basic sense, open banking is about the data that bank has, realizing that that belongs to the customer and not to the bank. And so open banking is about making it easy for customers to share that information with tools and services like ours in a very secure and modern way. So in the past, when customers sign up for a service like ours, they connect their banks with a username and sharing the username and password of that bank with our service. And we built Tiller so that we never actually see that username and password, but that username and password is still valuable to get access to that customer's bank. Now with open banking, and we just launched with Citi and also with Chase, and we're adding new banks as we go into 2021. Customers, when they want to connect Citi or Chase, we support thousands of banks, but those first two banks, and we're going to knock off the large 20 banks over the coming months. When they want to connect Citi or Chase or other banks we support with open banking, we actually take them to that bank site. They log in at that bank, not on our site, but at that bank with their username and password. And then using OAuth, which is a familiar tool to anyone who's ever shared, if you have a Google Calendar, for example, and you want to share it with a third-party tool, you do that through Google. You OAuth and you say, Google, I give you permission to share this service to this other third-party entity. That's the same thing they're doing with banking data. So customers log into Chase or Citi and say, I authorize you to give read-only access to transactions and balances to Tiller Money. And wrapped in that are so many huge wins. First of all, the credentials stay with the bank. That is a huge security win on its own. Second, it's putting the customer in control. They're specifically deciding which data they're sharing with that third-party tool or service. And if they ever want to revoke that access, they can go back to their bank and say, okay, I've shared data. Let me see, who have I shared data with? Okay, these services have access to my data. I'm going to revoke this one and add in this one. And so it puts customers in control. And it also means that the data feeds that we get from the banks through open banking are far more robust and reliable than ever. And so for us, high quality, reliable data is core to what we do. And that's something we put a lot of energy in. The feeds we're getting from these banks that we're bringing on through open banking are more reliable and faster than feeds we've ever had before. So that's a huge win for customers. It's a win obviously for Tiller Money. We're one of the first services in the US to go live with open banking, and it really meets our core values around security, privacy, putting customers in control. So when we saw this coming, we said, let's make this a priority, and we're really excited to have recently gone live with open banking.
That's cool. So it sounds like anything that puts the customer in better control and increases security, that's a win for all parties.
That's right. And you're going to see this as this rolls out. This is going to impact other tools. And I'll just give you a few examples. But let's say you're applying for a mortgage or refinancing. So when you do that, typically the lender is going to want to see recent statements from other banks. And in the past, that might mean going there and printing out or making copies of those statements, heaven forbid faxing, or you're trying to download that PDF, securely upload it into the portal of your lender so they can see your whole financial picture. And it's cumbersome, right? With open banking, as this gets embraced, what's going to happen is when you're applying for that mortgage, you actually can go into the lender and say, okay, here are the institutions where I have financial data. That lender will then take you to each of those bank sites where you can log into that bank site. You log into your Schwab account, your Fidelity account, your Vanguard account. You then say, okay, I want to give my lender access. And maybe in this case, you're going to say, I want to give them access to 6 months of data, and I want to give them access for the next 30 days, and then I want that to expire. That's such a better experience than trying to upload PDFs or fax data. It also ensures that there's a limited time period on that data. It's just going to be a big win. So I think we're going to see the benefits of open banking appear in a lot of the things we do online with our money, and it's a huge win. So really excited about it.
As a user, what do I look for so that I know that it is open banking? Am I looking for that terminology? Is it kind of when I'm trying to connect to another account via a website that I can see that it's sending me to the bank's website? How do I know?
If you're using open banking, anytime you're sharing access to data from a bank, you're going to go to that bank's website. So if I have a Citi account and I'm using open banking and I want to share that data with a third-party tool, that tool is going to take me back to my Citi account where I'll grant access. And again, this is a really familiar process. We see this kind of authentication and data sharing happen in other apps. And I gave the Gmail example. We don't give out our Google or our Microsoft credentials to other services. Instead, when we have a service we want to bolt on to our Google account, that service takes us to Google, where we have an OAuth screen that where we can provide consent. And so you'll know you're in open banking when anytime someone needs access to your account data, rather than asking you for credentials, they take you to your bank and allow your bank to manage what you're sharing. And again, if you roll back a few years ago, banks would be like, no, don't come to us. We don't want you to share any data. 5 years ago, that was the mindset with most of the large banks. They're like, no, you don't need to share any data with anyone. We can take care of your whole financial needs. And that's, these banks have acquired and merged and sort of grown into a single bank. You can do your brokerage, you can get your mortgage, you can track your data, you can, they try to do it all. And they've realized, okay, for some customers, they may want to do it all, but for a lot of their customers actually want to use that data with third-party services. And so it's a huge paradigm shift.
That's fantastic, because the phrase "jack of all trades, master of none," usually the single provider trying to do everything well, it's good in theory, but a little bit more difficult in practice. So when you can take your data and use different service providers for different things, that makes a lot of sense to me. It's this time of year, Peter, that I think it's a really good time for people to take a look at their finances, what can you do in the new year to make improvements and do things differently? We're all motivated.
The year end is a huge opportunity because if for our lives in general, right? Because there's something about the calendar and the collective experience of all of us sort of rolling the calendar forward to a new year. And I think that will never be more true, or certainly hasn't recently been more true than it will be this year. 2020 was an unexpectedly tough year, right? And a lot of us have been thrown challenges we never saw coming. And it just sort of magnified the pressure on all of us around health, around finances, around family, and for those of us with kids. So I think that 2021, one of the things that will remind us that this year teaches us is that, okay, we don't have control over everything. That was a big lesson from 2020, but we can still put together, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go in this new year? And I think that my recommendation as we think about the new year is really first writing down, what are the big picture goals? What is the feeling I want to have around my finances? And what are the goals that I want to do with it? And what I hear for a lot of people is that one of the feelings that they really want is some sense of visibility and control. And again, we can only control what we can control. Our income may, as many people have lost income or seen a reduction in income this year, but spending is something we can control. And we can, with what we have, we can try to control the variables that are available to us. And we can control how much visibility we have into our money. And honestly, seeing our data, seeing sort of what we're spending can be a huge win and a huge peace of mind. So what do you want to feel around your money in 2021? And then what are the tactical goals? Maybe it's making more progress in paying down some debt or getting ahead on a mortgage or saving for an emergency fund. If we've lost income this year, maybe we're living off of debt and we're growing that debt, but we want to grow it at a slower pace as we look for new income. Based on wherever we are, setting that goal and writing that goal down and try to keep that goal as sort of simple and concrete as possible. We can't boil the ocean in 2021, but we can make progress on one or two goals. Write that down, put it on a Post-it on your bathroom mirror or on your computer. And that's going to be the guiding force that's going to be helpful for the work that is required to get there. And the work, it's not that it's hard work, but there are many, many reasons why we would rather choose to watch Queen's Gambit than to dive into our finances, right? And so we need to remind ourselves of the goal we're working on, because the things that the resistance we're going to face as we go from January 1st, where we've written these ambitious New Year's resolutions, to February, March, and April and beyond, is our time is short. We probably have some fears. In addition to these hopes, we probably have some fears. I'm not good enough at this, or I don't think this is going to work, or I'm fill in the blank. We probably have some fears. Having that goal is going to be really helpful. And what's interesting is one of the things we're actually launching here at Tiller Money is a 30 Days of Financial Wins Challenge. And that kicks off right with the new year. And it fits really nicely with our free trial period. So we want this to be available to anyone. We are giving people via email wins that they can reasonably achieve. Twice a week, we're putting a thoughtful, awesome email in their inbox. And it's wins around getting a hold on what are my numbers, where am I at, what am I actually spending, setting a budget for the first time for some people, or getting back into a budget, and having a few wins on reducing some spend where we see some opportunity. It's going to vary for everyone in terms of the specifics, but this 30 Days of Financial Wins is really something we're going to walk people through. And it's tied very tightly with our community, where people can share their wins, post their questions, and really feel like they're in this with someone else, because that's what New Year's is about. We're all turning the page on a new year. And so that's for us, that's one of the things we're doing in the new year to help people get going.
Does the 30-day financial wins challenge, does it add a little fun to the process? Because a lot of people, when you talk about they should create a budget, they should look at their finances, it doesn't sound fun to them.
Yeah, that's a great point. I would say we're taking a light approach where we can, but I think that I would say beyond fun, what I think is we're trying to figure out some small wins so that people can actually feel some momentum. I would bet everyone here has some subscriptions that they have that are sort of barnacles on their financial accounts that they can scrape off. And that is an example of a small win that we're walking people through and giving them some help to achieve. And so that over the course of the month, we're hoping the feeling that people especially get is a feeling of empowerment. The community will make it fun. I'm going to be in there posting. I'm going to be taking, I've helped to put this course together, but I'm going to be a student in this financial wins challenge too. I'm going to be posting our experience in my family and our wins. I think that's actually, frankly, going to be fun to see sort of where are people seeing success, what are people doing, and having the sort of shared stories in the community around this.
Peter, when did the community launch?
The community launched in the fall of 2019. And you had asked sort of what else is in the community. There are people who like to do envelope budgets. There are people who like to do sort of Spartan budgets. We have people who are creating and sharing different approaches to budgeting in there. We have people who say, hey, look, I'm managing a few rental houses, and here's a workflow I use to track my rental houses. We have people sharing how they're thinking about their portfolio and their net worth. And so the nature of our service and the nature of everyone's unique financial needs is we're all approaching this a bit differently. And a lot of us are using Tiller Money because we want to do it our way, but oftentimes we want inspiration. How has someone approached this problem? How is someone thinking about an HSA savings account, and how are they tracking it? And so the community is a place where we can make all that real. We have a foundations template that we've built. We have some other templates that we've added into the community, but we see that what our customers are building and sharing is every bit as important as anything that we're building, because the nature of, again, finances and what people are trying to do is very diverse.
Can users share their templates in there?
Yes, customers can share templates, you bet. If they've built something that's helpful, we have customers that have shared awesome templates. They'll build something for themselves. They'll remove their own financial data. They'll share that sheet in the community and share some how-tos and some tips. And we've had some fun builders contests too, where we've actually celebrated people for what they're sharing. Even aside from the contest, that's a regular part of the community that we're excited to keep building is a place for people to share their templates. Yeah.
That's interesting, because I think last we spoke, you didn't really have that. Users would have to share kind of one-on-one if they were having a conversation with another Tiller user. From the perspective of running Tiller, you're kind of handing over the reins to the users and saying, you guys share, you guys decide how you're using it, and you can kind of let them run with it. What's that like?
When we last talked, in fact, the only way to use Tiller was one of our templates. And that's how we had initially, that was the constraint in the way we initially built our service. And now we actually deliver our feeds through an add-on. We have a Google Sheets add-on and a Microsoft Excel add-in that you can add onto any spreadsheet. And so that was one of the things that we did on our side with the product to make it possible for this community to exist, because now you can take our feeds and take them to any spreadsheet. And we want to provide, we put a lot of energy into our foundations template, and you can track your balance sheet, you can track your spending, you can budget if you want to, you can do that in the foundation template. We have a great customer success team that can support you. And that, we think, is a really good place to start. But we also strongly believe that is only one perspective. That is only one place to start. And we really want Tiller Money to be a place to support all kinds of workflows and all kinds of solutions. And to do that, we've got to get out of the way of it. And we've got to make room for customers to build what they want, to share what they're doing with others, to learn from and borrow from others who have built stuff. And people love Tiller Money because we're so flexible. And the community is a big part of giving people inspiration and making it easier for people to get into the solution they actually want for whatever their financial riddle is.
Coming up, how often should you be reviewing your finances? Tips for creating tracking categories for spending, and listen to the end to hear how Peter's teaching his kids, they're 7 and 10, about money. All that and more right after this short break. The show notes for this episode can be found at inspiredmoney.fm/176. If you're listening in your car or wherever you are, check the show notes if you want to learn more about Peter, Tiller Money, and all other things mentioned in this episode. It's time for the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Start the year on the right financial footing by tracking your spending month to month. Is this something that you're doing already? If not, try doing it just for 4 weeks. Maybe that sounds a little bit less daunting. If you're able to do it for 2 months, you'll begin to see how your spending fluctuates. Over time, you'll get more insight into periodic expenses like quarterly insurance premiums, back to school shopping, birthdays, holidays, and those are some of the expenses that can throw off your financial plans. No one's finances are perfect, but tracking your spending is the first step you can take to better understand where your money is going every month and where you are. You might be able to better anticipate any potential cash flow shortfalls or find extra money that you can put towards savings, paying down debt, or investing. Write down your expenses in a notebook, or use a financial app, or use a spreadsheet. Do whatever poses the least amount of friction for you and suits your personality. If it's easy to do, you're going to be more likely to continue doing it. If you're interested in trying Tiller Money, that means downloading your transactions and bank data into a spreadsheet. You can get a free 30-day trial by going to inspiredmoney.fm/spreadsheet. Again, that's inspiredmoney.fm/spreadsheet. If you try it, let me know how you make out. That's the Runnymede Money Tip of the Week. Inspired Money is brought to you by Runnymede Capital Management. We help you to plan, invest, and worry less. If you need financial planning or you have questions about your investments, contact me directly at inspiredmoney.fm/Andy. That's inspiredmoney.fm/ANDY. Those emails come directly to my inbox, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction. I hope you're enjoying this update from Peter Polson. I wanted to bring him back to help motivate all of us to better track our finances and to set some personal finance goals for the year 2021. In the second half of this interview, we're going to reference a ledger that Peter used when he was a kid. So to give you some context, here's a quick rewind to episode 45.
I received a weekly allowance. I think it was about 25 cents. And part of the requirement for that allowance was that I had to keep a ledger and track everything that was coming in and everything that was going out. And also related to that, we grew up in this philosophy, which there are many names for, and I think is fairly common, but you save some, you share some, and you spend some. So I roughly, a third of my money for me to spend, a third was to save for the future, and a third was to share with a charity. And that all got tracked in this ledger. And so quarters and nickels and $1 here or there. And that's my earliest memory. It was sitting down and it was doing math, but it was also this accounting. And my dad wanted to know that each week I knew where every penny effectively had gone since the last week before he was going to give me my allowance for this new week.
That's such a great start. Do you remember as a kid, did you like this ledger? I mean, you must have had like a positive feeling toward it rather than negative.
It gave me control. It's funny. I hadn't really thought about it until recently. And it gave me the sense of control for one thing, and this sense of tidiness. So I had this, it was a ledger book like you might find at any, in the old days in like a stationery store or something. Certainly you could find them online. It was black with some red binding to it, and you open it up and it has lines and then 2 columns, a bunch of columns, but sort of a main column to write what you've spent or what you've made, and then 2 columns on the right, depending on whether it's income in or an expense out. But I I do. I have this. I actually haven't seen this book in years. I don't know. I don't know where that ledger is, but I have this fond association with it because it did give me this sense of control and this sense of satisfaction. And I was motivated. I wanted to make sure it all balanced. And I think it helped to build a positive relationship around money, frankly, from an early stage of feeling like I had some sense of control.
Welcome back to the present. You're listening to Inspired Money. I'm Andy Wong. When you can get a bird's eye view of your users, do you get to crowdsource some best practices?
We definitely, the community is also a place where on the solutions that we've built, we get great feedback. And in fact, there have been customers who have even said, hey, I saw this formula that you're using here. And hey, here's a suggestion for something that's going to work even better. There have been some customers who've gotten down to that level with us, or other customers who said, hey, I really like the way you show the balance sheet on this template, but I actually built a different version that I think is pretty cool. And here it is. And so there are times where customers are giving specific feedback that we incorporate into new versions of our templates, but also without us getting in the way. There are times where customers take something we have and riff on it and make it better in their eyes. So absolutely. And I think that for the team we have that's building our front end templates and has been really inspiring because it's like there's a conversation we're having, and there's a portion of our community that's especially active, and we know if we throw something out there, we're gonna get some great feedback. We have recently been working on some new workflows around helping people with savings goals and also helping people to pay down debt. We've had a long-standing template around it's called our debt progress template to help people reduce their debt, but we've recently been thinking we need fresh eyes on how we're helping people with debt and how we're helping people with savings. And so we put out some draft concepts of those templates into our community, and the feedback has been phenomenal. And we've been iterating based on that feedback, and we're going to have something. We have released several updates to those, and we're going to continue releasing updates as we continue to improve them based on that feedback. That never would have been possible without our community and without the passionate contributors in our community.
That's great. Well, I hope that we can motivate listeners to, if they haven't been tracking their finances closely, to begin. I think oftentimes the hardest part is starting. Do you have advice in how often someone should be reviewing their spreadsheet?
A good place to start is daily. And I think of finances less like, I've got to reorganize the garage, which may be a bit overwhelming, and more like brushing your teeth or flossing, which is, it's quick and it's short. And that's honestly the way we built this course. You may decide you don't need to check in daily, but a habit, if you haven't been in the habit, and if you're sort of blind and have been, frankly, enjoying tuning out to your finances, a new habit that's daily is a far easier one than one that's, on the third day or a Wednesday and a Friday or whatever. And so starting daily and simply going in and saying, okay, what are my new transactions? You may be using our AutoCat tool, which allows you to categorize your transactions based on the rules you build, or maybe you're just categorizing manually. Either way, you can look at your recent transactions, see if there's anything unusual. And that may be some days that's all you're doing is just making sure your recent transactions are categorized. And maybe yesterday I had 3 transactions. So, that's 30 seconds of my time today. I come in tomorrow, maybe I had 10 transactions. So that's maybe a minute or 2 of my time. And then I may come in the next day and I may think, okay, now I'm curious. I have this data. I want to see if I can get this report. So maybe I end up spending 10 or 15 minutes in there that day. And then the next day, it might be 30 seconds. But if it's just a touch point every day, what you're going to find, what we see is that customers end up getting curious, and they take some relief by just sort of being in the know. And then they get curious, and some days they do spend some more time digging into it, and other days it's just a quick look. But that daily habit, and especially if it can be at the same time every day, maybe it's at lunch, or maybe it's when you sort of first log into your computer in the morning, but that daily habit is a much easier one to build. And that's where I would start. Start there for the first month. And then you can once you've built that cadence and that momentum, you can change it up.
Well, hopefully you reach a point where looking at your net worth daily becomes a fun thing to do rather than something that creates stress for you.
That's true. I mean, and I think part of this is, what's our relationship to our money? And I very much believe that money is a tool. And so it's trying to take some of the judgment out. Our balance sheet may be in the red. It may be in the black. There are very few people who look at their balance sheet and don't say, okay, I still have work to do. I want to move it from where it is to someplace else. That's fine. Thinking about money as a tool, trying to take the judgment away. And ultimately, I think the good life is not about waking up being stressed about money each day. It's trying to be aware. We need money the same way we need water and we need air. But if we think about how the infrastructure is built, some of us may have big swimming pools that we need filled with water, and others may just have small domestic needs. But we have the infrastructure there to say, okay, I can reliably get the water into my house so I can make dinner, I can take a shower, I can drink. We want the same thing with our money. We want to figure out what are the things that we realistically want to get done. And we want to use money as a tool to get there. And I think that taking the judgment away from that is really important. And that may be, okay, like to be in a financially sound place right now, if I can trim some spending here, or if I can find some ways to make some more income here, again, I can pay down this debt, or I can save more here, I can make progress. My big goals are right now, I want to save for that vacation, or I want to make sure I have something for retirement, or the kids are going to be going to college. And how can I make some incremental progress towards that goal and use money as a tool? It's not that I am going to use money to judge whether I am worthwhile or not. I am trying to use money as a tool to accomplish these goals, and trying to take a little bit of the emotion out of it will make it a lot easier to come and check in on a regular basis and really own it, as opposed to pushing it off and saying, I'd rather not look because it's probably not where I want it to be.
Great advice. Remove the emotion so that you can make wiser and better thought out decisions. I think one of the strengths of Tiller is the customization and personalization that a user can implement in tracking and budgeting their money. I know that you have like the flexibility to really set up unique categorization. What are different ways that you see users creating categories?
Yeah, categories are definitely where we apply our personality and our work styles. And we allow people to have complete flexibility there. You can create hundreds of categories, or you can have one category, and you can group them into logical groups that make sense to you. In our family, our big groups are living expenses, where we have several categories like utilities and groceries that are living expenses. And then we have another group that's discretionary, where we have things that we can choose to spend or not. And that includes categories like vacations and home improvements. One of the things that I find really interesting is we have some users who are really sparing with their categories and actually just have a fixed and variable, or a living and discretionary, depending on how you want to categorize it, category, and that's it. Like, think about two categories, maybe an income category is a third. And for them, it's they actually want to rise above the level of saying, okay, it doesn't really matter whether that money was spent in groceries or on the cell phone, like those are living expenses, and whether it was vacation or home improvements, those are discretionary. I'm actually going to pull away from from that level of detail, and I want to just see a dashboard. This week, our discretionary spending was X, and our fixed expenses, living expenses, were Y, and therefore we know next week we can spend this much on discretionary. I think that's a really interesting approach, an interesting sort of mind game to really break it down to that those few. We also, we have people who really get satisfaction with having lots of categories and having them. Maybe they have one for each pet. Maybe they have one for each car, and that's fine. That's where you can express your personality. And I love it. And you can come up with something that works for you. And so, yeah, the sky's the limit with how you can think about categories. One of the things that we're also unique with speaking of categories, is we don't auto-categorize any transactions based on our rules. And most tools do that, and they ultimately get enough wrong that it just drives people nuts. So with Tiller Money, two approaches to categories, and you can use one or both. You can manually categorize, and we make it really easy to manually categorize. But we also have this beloved solution called AutoCat. And AutoCat lets you set up your own rules. So for example, I can say that any spending on Amazon on this credit card is discretionary, and any spending on Amazon on this credit card is living. Or I can say any expense at the gas station above $15 is gas, and any expense at the gas station below 15 is probably the kombucha that I bought, and that's eating out. And I can create those rules, and those are actually specifically rules that I have created with our AutoCat. You can create your own rules, and so that you can get some of Tiller Money categorizing based on your categories and your logic rules. And that's also, again, we're allowing people to express themselves and have our tool follow them and make their life a little easier with some categorization, completely based on the rules they design.
There's a balance that one has to strike between categorizing to pique your interest and your tracking, but not have it overwhelming and so difficult to do that you can't keep it up.
That's right. No, there is a balance. And I think if, in general, my rule of thumb for people is keep it simple unless you have a reason not to. I think that applies to categories. I think that applies to other workflows with our finances and frankly with our lives, is keep it simple. If we're thinking about something we want to sustain for the long term, simple can be good. So I wouldn't give each a category unless you really felt like that was something important to you and you wanted 112 categories, in which case you can do it. But if you could get by with 30 categories rather than 112, for a lot of people, that's going to be a little better over the long run. So I would, when in doubt, err on the side of simplicity. But yes, it's up to you.
Once people have a good process set up so that they're able to load in their transactions and it's being auto-categorized so they can see it clearly, do you have tips for kind of gamifying the money process so that you can reward yourself or have fun and encourage yourself to keep it going?
Yeah, gamification and rewards and how to keep it going. I think that there's a couple approaches that I actually think are interesting. One is simply setting a reward up for yourself. I'm going to treat myself to that coffee and cinnamon roll at the end of the week if I have been in my sheet every day for 7 days. The other thing is around the savings specifically. There's a whole sort of school of thought. Sometimes it's really, if we have a big goal that we want to realize, sometimes it can be hard to get there because it seems a distance away. And so let's say that we're trying to save $10,000 for something. Rather than focusing on that 10,000, just saying, okay, I'm going to save $1,000 a month and put it into this new account in my bank that's for savings. I'm going to put $1,000 into that each month. And then at the end of 10 months, you're going to have $10,000 and you can decide where you're going to spend it. And you're going to feel this huge victory around that. And sometimes people actually have been known to do that with others as well, where you're actually giving that $1,000, you're making it hard to access. You can give it to an account that you don't normally see, and at the end of that 10 months, you'll have that $10,000 and you'll feel some sort of victory. The third thing I would say is that, and something that's uniquely helpful with the way our service is built around Google Sheets and Excel, both are really now collaborative spreadsheets. You can share them with someone else. And so maybe that's a spouse, but maybe there's a friend. People share a lot more financial data than they have at other times in history. And so think, is there someone who is also working on a financial goal? And what if you both decided you were going to do this together? And what if you actually, this is a really big concept for a lot of people, and I get that. Maybe it's your partner, and that's sort of safe, but maybe it's also maybe it's an accountant or advisor because there's sort of a trusted professional relationship, or maybe it's someone who's a friend who you really would trust with your finances, and maybe you both decide we're going into this together and we're just going to share our sheets with each other and check in with each other and feel that collective motivation. Like, hey, how'd you do today? Or hey, and you can actually have that conversation. You can see that you've both been making progress on tracking, and sometimes that being in the journey with someone else can be motivating and also rewarding.
Peter, my last question for you, because I know that you have 2 kids, you are founder of Tiller. Do you involve your kids at all? Like, how do you teach them the importance of tracking money? And are they using spreadsheets yet?
That is such a good question, Andy. So, yes. So we have a 7 and a 10-year-old, and our 10-year-old has especially realized that he's sort of gotten, it is an age where he's become curious about money. And as much as possible, we really try to talk to him as, money is this tool. It's not something that you just want to covet on its own, but it's a tool. We in our family have a rule with our boys that the money they make gets divided into thirds. 1/3 of it is to give to charity. 1/3 of it is to save for college, and 1/3 is to spend. And for our oldest, that's spending on Legos at the moment. And we have an allowance. Our allowance is $1 a day, and he makes more money than we give him in his allowance. He does jobs for neighbors. He busks. He plays cello, so he'll busk at the local store, grocery store, to make some money. And again, all the money he earns is divided into those 3 buckets. So he actually recently made a $500 donation to our local library, which is a project that is dear to our family, and that was really meaningful to him. For him, we track all of this in a ledger, and I actually am just about to move him from a paper ledger to a spreadsheet because I've been dying to get him to use Tiller Money because he has his bank accounts and whatnot. But I will say, starting off, I think there's some value for him. He's learning math, he's learning writing, and actually pulling out the pen and paper, sitting down with the ledger. He doesn't need more screen time. Let's actually write this out. And so he has a ledger where he keeps all of his income, all of his expenses. He just bought, a new Star Wars Lego set. And we're going to move him. I'm going to move him over to it. I think he turns 11 next week. So I think that's a good occasion to say, all right, let's set you up with the Tiller Money account, because I actually think he's at a place where he's also going to get a lot from learning about how that works with a spreadsheet, and his handwriting and sort of the skills that the ledger builds, I think, are in a good place. So that's how we think about it with our boys. We try to talk where we can. It's hard because the numbers that we deal with as adults are bigger than the numbers he deals with, because we're thinking about mortgage. We're thinking about a doctor's visit seems like a ridiculous expense to a kid, right? Because it's like even something like that. And for us, it's like, it's a no-brainer. And so it's sort of hard to get them to calibrate, but we do try to talk as much as we can around the dinner table around finances. Sometimes it's in generalities, like here's something we're trying to save and here's some expenses we're deciding to reduce. And other times it's with specifics, because they're always thirsty for specifics. But we have to sort of decide what's most helpful to help them understand the message we're trying to get, which is, again, it's a tool. We make decisions. We try to live with our values, manifest, like we want the way we put our money to work to help us realize our values and not be in conflict with our values. And I think that's a really good thing for kids to learn. I will say, one of my teammates has a high school daughter, he has taken the whole next step where he's handed over his family Tiller Money account to his daughter. It's a spreadsheet, so they're both in it, right? It's collaborative. But he's told his daughter, all right, I want you to budget for our family. And so she sees everything. She sees, all the family expenses. And I think that for a high school age kid, oh my gosh, what an education for them to take responsibility for budgeting for their family. And I think that that's only going to set her up for success for financial responsibility in a few years when she's on her own.
Wow, that is full transparency, and what an experience. And I like how you have your son doing the paper general ledger. I think if the listener today wants to go back and listen to Inspired Money episode 45, that's how you did it. when you were a kid. So
yes, that's right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And so I guess the apple doesn't fall from the tree. But I think, talking as much as you can and sort of sharing what is age appropriate as you can with your kids is so valuable.
Well, thanks, Peter. Thanks for the update on what's new at Tiller Money. Thanks for the tips for what we can be doing at this time of year and setting ourselves up for a better 2021. Tell the Inspired Money listener where to get more information and to follow you.
You can find us at Tiller Money, and our website is tillerhq.com. And right now you can sign up. We have a 30-day trial. So if you're curious to give a look and see what Tiller Money is all about, we also have a fantastic customer support team. We do ask where you heard about us, and please tell us you found us through this podcast. We'd love to know that. So as you sign up, let us know that when we ask that question, and tillerhq.com.
Great. I'll put the links in the show notes. Thanks so much, Peter. Great to chat with you and catch up.
Thanks for your time, and glad to talk with you and share more with your audience today.
So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? I liked Peter's advice to keep it simple unless you have a reason not to. That will help you sustain a practice over the long term. He also added, when in doubt, err on the side of simplicity. I love that advice. Once again, if you want to try Tiller Money and tracking your finances in a spreadsheet, you can get a free 30-day trial by going to inspiredmoney.fm/spreadsheet. That's inspiredmoney.fm/spreadsheet. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment, please let me know. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll give you a shout out here on the podcast. Email me at inspiredmoney.fm/Andy. Tell me your favorite Inspired Money moment, and while you're at it, also share with me your Inspired Money story. I'd love to learn more about you and hear from you. This episode of Inspired Money was edited by Christopher Wright of Wright Media. Thank you so much for joining me on this mission. If you're not yet subscribed, what are you waiting for? I hope you'll do it right now to make sure that you won't miss next week's episode. I'll see you then. The music you're listening to right now and all other music on today's show is by the amazing Jim Kimo West. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.